Hey everybody, James Stone here, NorCal Guides and Sportsmen's Association. Just wanted to come live today to kind of explain everything that transpired over the salmon informational meeting today for the last couple of hours that transpired. So I'm going to kind of wait for a moment, let some people join, and we will get underway. But events that are coming up, the Pacific Fisheries Management Council is going to be meeting next week in Vancouver in Washington, and that's going to be coming up with the three alternatives for a alternative A, an alternative B, and an alternative C. And then there will be more public comment that will come out, one more public comment meeting. I hope that they're going to allow verbal public comment. Normally that meeting is in person, so it should be somewhere between Eureka and San Francisco, so you should be able to have an actual chance to make public comment because they've stopped doing public comment on the actual informational meeting. They only allowed question and answers where you can't see who's on the meeting, you can't see who was typing questions, or the department actually cherry-picked on who they got to whose questions they picked and whose questions they got to choose. I received over 17 text messages from people saying that they were asking questions on the informational meeting, and yet nobody was willing to respond to them or ask that question. So I know that you can email oceansalmon@wildlife.ca.gov, so that might be another avenue for those of you that were frustrated by not being able to make public comment or not being addressed on the questions that you were asking. So anyway, that goes out to all of those. So I'll get going. This is going to be a fast one today, guys. So I know I've said that before and gone a long time because there's just so much information out there. But what we received today was the information that was confirmed from my last meeting, that my last live video that I did for all of you 2.5, 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I came to all of you and said that, our numbers that we had forecasted, pre-season in 2024, the department said there was 213,000 fish out there through the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, through NOAA Fisheries. And my estimate was that there was really probably only about 105,000. And that's what I estimated the actual index to be. The escapement was going to be around 105,000. And I said that last April in live videos, if you go back. But the 213,000 ended up being 99,000. That's what it came out today. And those numbers got released last week through the review of ocean fisheries. It was originally, they were saying that number could have even been a little bit lower, but they had made a adjustment to the cutoff of the grills, the jack salmon, the 2-year-old. And so that measurement requirement that they managed changed about 2,000 fish. So instead of about 20,000 plus jacks, they moved about 1,900 of those jacks down into a adult classification of 3-year-olds. And so that's why that number of jacks moved down to the low 19,000s for the Sacramento, and then the jack number was not over 20,000. So as Dr. O'Farrell explained today from the NOAA Fisheries on his modeling, there was a big autocorrelation that went down today, and I think a lot of people are having trouble understanding that. And so what he means by that is that there's the curvature of the graph over the linear equation, and when he inputs the jack number on the x-axis, he puts the jack number, and on the y-axis going up, it tells him how many thousands of fish are supposed to be there the next year for abundance, for forecasting, so that you can then manage on that number. And what transpired was, when you go to that 19,000 jacks and then you go up, it gets you into the 300,000 range, which, would have been where that linear equation was. But the autocorrelation that they've been using over the last, I think they started doing that in 2007 or 2010. So they've been doing it for at least a decade. And the autocorrelation that they've been doing, as Dr. O'Farrell said, he said it's getting more and more accurate every year with that autocorrelation. So the number didn't meet the line. And since the real escapement was 99,000 and not 213,000, the adjustment happens in the model of that 100,000+ fish. So what that means is that the forecast of, if we were accurate last year, and there was, 180, 190, 200,000 fish that returned to the Sacramento system, then this year abundance would have read in the 300,000s and it would have been accurate. But because they were so far off last year and off the year before with no fishing for 2 years, they did a big autocorrelation adjustment this year. And, I think that it was very aggressive, personally. I think that it was very aggressive, and they possibly could be, a few more fish out there than what they're predicting. They're saying 165,000 fish out there. My math came in this year at 180. That's what I believed were out there of actual fish that will escape the river absent fishing. So I am about 15 to 20,000 fish more in my math and in my theory over. And so you can all test me on where that number ends up coming in next year. So you can see it. But I will say for the last 5 years, I've been very accurate on my modeling. I think that the worst that I've done is 15% or 14% off on my estimates. And it's not just, that data is not just from my practical experience. It's speaking with hundreds of fishing guides. It's speaking with hundreds of anglers about what we're seeing on the rivers, what temperatures we're seeing on the rivers, juveniles that we're seeing, jacks that we're seeing, and the actual numbers to really bring it to truth of what is really returning. And I would say that it's been really, really bad the last few years, as you all know. So where does this leave us on the Sacramento? Well, it leaves us with the estimate number is 165,000 that's out there and change, 165,500. And now, so what you would have to do is the first step that will transpire in Vancouver will be that the Salmon Advisory Subpanel gets the guidance from NOAA, which they have, which is 122,000. And so as soon as they open the fishery with 1 day on the water on the ocean, the model, what the ocean harvest model will do is it will take that 122,000 and it will automatically kick in the 14% on top for the river fishery, which is the historical average of harvest. When there's 122 or more thousand fish that return, the average harvest is generally 14%, which we know is not accurate because the last 7 or 8 years, even with 130, 140, 150,000 fish returning on the years that they did make it over 122,000, our harvest rates weren't at 14%. And when they miss, which has been 7 out of the last 10 years, 70% error rate on missing escapement, that number has been really low, like 4%, 6%, 8% of actual harvest for inland fisheries. So that kind of gives you more data and information to kind of absorb and understand. But what that model will do, the day one, it will kick in that 17,000 fish on top. So you got 139,000 river run size, right? So the model will then take 165 minus the 139,000, and that will give you the number of, basically right at about 26,000 fish to actually go harvest. So the ocean harvest will have 26,000 fish out there to actual harvest according to the model and the data that we just got back today. So then the SAS job will be to split those fish first with Oregon and California. So if you take those 26,000 fish and you split them, the first thing that happens is that 20% comes right off the top to Oregon. So that means Oregon will get roughly about 5,200 of those Sacramento fish. That's the historical split on those fish. So it's an 80-20 split. Oregon sees the 5,200 fish, and that allows them to open their fisheries off the Oregon coast for Chinook. Okay? Now, last year they only caught about 3,000 technically, but, their fisheries were limited because the more fish that you give them in the model, the more time, area, place, days on the water you can actually open. So what they're going to do is they'll take that 5,200 fish, and then Oregon will go craft their fisheries time area place with their salmon advisory subpanel and their members of the salmon advisory subpanel. So then you will take that number of 26,000 and you'll reduce the 5,200 fish. We're just going to say 5,000 to make numbers easy. That's going to give us somewhere around 21,000 fish for all the state of California for Chinook to harvest out of the Sacramento. About 21,000 fish. Okay, that's just a rough number, not giving you identical to the dot numbers. So anybody that's trying to challenge me on, he was wrong by 380 fish, I'm just giving you rough math idea. 21,000 and change fish. Okay, so 21,000 fish. Now, here's where, how do we divide that 21,000? Well, the historical split between the commercial fleet and the recreational fleet is somewhere between 20 to 25% to the recreational fleet. 75 to 80% of those fish go to the commercial fleet. Now, that has been the historical average forever. And the reason why, some of you might be going, red flag right now, that's not an equal split. It doesn't need to be. And the reason why is because the recreational fishery has so many less impacts than the commercial fleet that by getting 20 to 25% of average historical harvest, that opened a completely wide open fishery for the recreational and charter boat fleet. So normally on a normal, lower abundance in the 300,000s, if we had 20% of the stock, we would be able to have a wide open summer fishery. We don't have that abundance, right? All we really have right now is a lower amount of that quota. And so I'm kind of doing that, but then I'm going to kind of explain what probably will happen. So right now that gives you the 21,000, and that now tells you that the commercial fleet, if you look at that 21,000, we'll see about 16,000 of those fish, and 5,000 will go to the recreational sector. Well, you all know that if you only have 5,000 fish for every single recreational angler and all the 38 CPFV charter boats that are registered, plus the hundreds of six-pack guide boats, charter boats that are going out of all of these ports, that you all can understand that 5,000 fish is not that many fish. They can't even open it up for one day. I don't think they can. I mean, 1 day, 2 days maximum on the recreational side based on those numbers, okay? The commercial fleet, in hindsight, 16,000 fish divided by 1,000 permits, okay? 16,000 divided by 1,000 permits is 160 fish per commercial vessel. That's not going to do them any good because 160 fish times let's just say a 10-pound average and $10 per pound, just to make math easy again, folks. I'm just giving you this math easy. That puts you right at about, 160 fish, $10 a fish, $100 per fish. That puts you right at around, maybe $16,000 for the per commercial boat. Okay. So, and that doesn't count any of their fuel. That doesn't count any of their bait. That doesn't count any of their ice. That doesn't count any of their moorage or anything like that. And so now you're starting to understand where it's really hard to craft those seasons, right? So what happened last year, which really irritated me, was that for the second time in the history since the Pacific Fisheries Management Council even started, for the second time, 2018 and 2024, for the first time, the California representatives that sit on the actual council actually said, no, we need more fish to harvest in the ocean. So what they did was they took that 14% over the top of the escapement conservation objective. They took that 14% and then they move it into the bigger quota of the ocean. So now I'm going to do that math for you because I already know that that's what they're going to try to do again, which is wrong. Number one, it's the wrong thing to do because that 14% is allocated for inland fisheries and guides. There's hundreds of businesses that are relying on those fish to come home so that they can fish. But what they're going to do is just like what they tried to do last year is they're going to try to take that 17,000 and jump them in to the total pool. So now, instead of having a total, rough estimate of the, we said 26,000 fish in the ocean. Now you're up 17 plus 26. Now you have 43,000. And people are going to say, where did you get that math? 165,000 abundance, 122,000 conservation objective at the minimum. So if they kill every last tail and they put every fish into the total pool, now you have a 43,000 pool. Okay. Now here's where it gets interesting. This is what upset me last year is, no offense to my Oregonian friends, but those fish don't belong to you. Those fish belong to the people of California coming into the inland to support their recreational fishery. But if you now put that pool of inland river quota into the big quota, now you have 43,000 fish instead of 26,000. So now Oregon gets 8,600 fish instead of 5,200. You see what just happened right there? By the state of California doing that last year, okay, even though they closed California down, but by the representatives doing that last year, they gave 20% of the river allocation in the model to Oregon, to a different state. Again, I know I have Oregonian friends on this call right now watching because they've been texting me and I can see it coming through. It's nothing personal, but it's not right. It'd be like me saying, okay, I want some of your Rogue River fish. I want some of your Southern Oregon fish. And so you need to take that river quota that you're allowed out of Gold Beach, and I want you to put that in the Ocean Oregon model so that the ocean people can catch those fish. The reason that we've had these set up for decades and decades is, the reason why. And there hasn't been a specific allocation for the specific, this is exactly what the river gets every year. It's based on a historical average of harvest so that you don't prevent overfishing inland. That's what it's for. So, what that basically means is that if you have the river running at 122,000 and they put the 14% on top for a river run size of 139,000, on average, the river fishery will harvest those 17,000 fish and you will still make the 122,000 escapement. That's what the model is basically saying. It's not a technical allocation that is, grained in stone. It's just what the ocean harvest model has been doing over the last multiple decades. It's always been 14% that gets allocated on top of whatever that escapement goal is. The higher that escapement goal goes, like last year it was 180, the 14% on top of 180 adds 25,200 fish because it makes sense. The more fish you send into the river, the more people will contact those fish. So when there's low abundances in the river and low escapements, there's no fish being caught. It's very few because you don't contact them. But the more fish that you send into the river, the higher those contact rates are going to go for certain people. Now, getting back to the way that the model reads these fish is that if you had 43,000 now and you take that river run allotment that the model keeps on there and you now kick it into the ocean, you now have 43,000, 20% would kick over into Oregon. And so you would take the roughly 8,000 fish off. Now you have 35,000 fish instead of 21,000 fish. And so you would be able to then craft seasons on that. It gives you more fish to even be able to craft seasons. And then you would have to have the argument or the allocation of what would be fair and equitable, what would be fair and equitable quotas, or what would be fair and equitable allotments for each sector, right? So you have recreational ocean, you have commercial ocean, and then you have river inland, right? Anything inland of the Golden Gate Bridge is considered inland. So you have the entire bay, which is millions of people. You have tens of thousands of salmon fishermen that fish all in there. You've got all of the Benicia, then you've got all of the Delta, and then you have the river fisheries, right? So you have all of that area geographically. It's huge of how much area geographically. It's over 345 miles of actual access for a lot of people that don't have boats, that can fish from shore, that have other types of opportunity on those fish. So that's what we're talking about. The differences is here of what could happen is, are they going to try to allocate on or craft fisheries on 21,000, or are they going to try to craft fisheries somewhere on that, 35,000 number, roughly. And so if you took the 35,000 number, okay, the higher of the two, okay, because if it was the lower, you would already know what the river allocation was because it's the 14%. But if they moved that into the general total harvestable fish, you heard the word today, harvestable surplus, they said on the meeting. That's what they mean, is they consider anything above, one fish above 122,000 is considered harvestable surplus according to the fisheries management plan. And so that's what they mean. So if you were to do that and you take those 35,000 fish, how would you then break them up, right? That would be that discussion. Well, number one, the Pacific Fisheries Management Council is not responsible for inland fisheries. That's not their job. That's the job of being on the Fish and Game Commission. The Fish and Game Commission of each of the states, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and California, are responsible for their inland fisheries management plans, okay? So you have to then, you're basically taking away the jurisdiction of them deciding on their fishery of that fishery to the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. But the council could, theoretically, they could then take that allotment of, what's fair and equitable for inland of the 35,000. Is it 5,000 fish? Is it 10,000 fish? Is it 15,000 fish? What is it? But historically, it's 14% of the escapement number in the model on top, which dictates the river run size, the total amount of fish that have to come home. So if you look at that, and you would say, where does that 35,000 then get broken up, right? Because we've already allocated the 20% to Oregon, so Oregon can have all of their ocean fisheries. That would make them wide open, because Oregon last year only caught, I think, 3,000 of our stock. Keep in mind, I'll update you on that number on Friday when we go to the Oregon state meeting and we get to hear exactly what they caught and what they found. But I think it was around 3,000 fish, roughly, give or take, that they caught of the Sacramento stocks. That would be sac, feather, American, or Yuba fish. So any of those stocks, that does not count the McCollum. The McCollum is a bonus fishery. A lot of those fish are paid for by the commercial fleet out of the McCollum River, and have been for a long, long time. There are some mitigation fish there, but it's about 3.2 million, I believe, out of the McCollum fishery. And it does produce fish for harvest, for recreational fisheries as well. But if we take that 35,000, where are they going to break that all up? Like, how do you split that up, right? So, I mean, if you start just like say, okay, I'm breaking up. I had a little pause there, everybody. If you just look at the, the basis, and you said, okay, we have 35,000 fish. We want to, be fair and equitable. 17,000 was the river, the standard, on it. There's going to be no fishing inland from the Golden Gate all the way up to Sacramento. They're not going to allow that. They just won't allow that fishing because that stock is so depressed. Last year, it was, roughly 7,000 fish returned to that upper river. It's like 4,600 adults and like 2,600 returned to Coleman. It was one of the worst returns in the history for the main stem. And so they're not going to allow any fishing inland on any of those areas. And so if you were to go just basic math and say, okay, we're only allowing fishing in the feather and in the American rivers from the mouth up, no fishing anywhere in the main stem, no fishing anywhere near the bay, no fishing anywhere near the delta. Basically, you're going to lose, 80+% of your access as inland recreational fishermen, and inland businesses are going to lose roughly 80%, no matter what happens, whether the fishery stays open or closed. There's going to be no fishing in that Sacramento section because the stock is so bad right now and so depressed. So you would have to say, okay, maybe in those two rivers you have roughly a 7%, let's just say 7%, right? That would be a one fish limit with a month, maybe 6 weeks of access at a one fish limit. you would probably be at about a 7% on top of the escapement. So that's going to be around 8,000. So I'm just going to say that just to be rough. And the reason I know that is because when I look back at the years that we had to do a reduction, which would have been the 2018 season, and also when we've had one fish limits before, and looking at the average of the escapement of the fish that come back, that would be kind of in the ballpark, 7-8%. So if you now take that 7-8% and you say, okay, well, what's 7% of, or excuse me, what's half of the 17,000? That would be about 8,000 fish. So if you take 8,000 fish and you send them inland out of the 35,000, now you're down to 27,000, okay? And then you would say, okay, we have 27,000 fish to harvest out in the ocean. And then you did the 80-20 split or the 75-25 split between commercial and recreational, which is the historical splits between those two. You're now starting to see the picture of, 20% of 28,000 fish, right, is 5,600 fish. That means that the recreational fishery, and this is just an example, you guys. I'm just giving you how it works, how the model actually works. And so you now would be, on that example, allocating less fish to the entire state of California for recreation and for all the charter boats and the six-pack charters than you would be allocating to Oregon. Okay? So I don't know if everyone's following that math, but that's basically true. And that's why by taking the river allocation or the historical harvest, if you don't want to call it an allocation, if you just say the historical harvest of 14%, if you move that into the total ocean fishery, you're actually sending more fish to be caught off the Oregon coast in the model, theoretically, paper fish, than you would be in the recreational sector. Now, even if you got 30% of 26,000 fish, right? That would put you at about 8,000, right? Okay, so say it's 30% and you get 30% of the total allocation, right? Well, then you're talking 8,000 for inland, 8,000 for rec, ocean. Now you're starting to get level and equal, right? So now you take those, and now you only have 20,000 fish, 19,000 fish for the entire commercial fleet. And you divide that again by, 1,000 boats, and you start seeing how many fish everybody gets, right? It's not many. If everybody got 10 fish and there's 1,000 permits, that's 10,000 fish. So the commercial fleet is, going to be very difficult to even, I think, try to craft seasons with it, because even if they get their full allotment according to the historical average, according to the historical river runs, according to the historical splits between Oregon and California, and then between commercial and recreational, if we follow those averages, and I don't know if that's what they're going to do, I'm just telling you, as when I sat there for 6 years and was part of the decision-making process for the SAS, we had these exact conversations, and I have all the charts and the sheets and the Excel spreadsheets that show every single year and what the splits were between every allocation. And this doesn't count the Klamath fish. That's completely different. So those have different splits. And I will talk about that quickly, and I'm going to be wrapping up here in 8 minutes. So I'm going to go quick, guys. So hopefully everyone understands. And that's what the Salmon Advisory Subpanel members are going to be facing. Jimmy Yarnell, John Atkinson, George Bradshaw, and Kevin Goods. That's what those 4 individuals are going to be responsible for, hashing all of that out, figuring out all those splits, and then figuring out how many fish they even have possible. Then they try to open one day in June, one day in July, one day in August, and then the model will kick back. If you open one day in July across the entire state of California, here's how many Chinook you'll catch out of the Sacramento system. Here's how many Chinook you'll catch out of the Klamath system. Here's how many Chinook you'll catch of other stocks, right? Which could be, Oregon stocks, or could be McCollum, San Joaquin stocks, or other stocks that California is not managed on. So hopefully that kind of all makes sense. I'm not advocating for anything, or I'm not advocating for how they need to run the model, except for the fact that I and my group feels and my board of directors feel that it has been wrong to take the river allocation, the river historical average for 2 times and remove it out of the model, which then in turns splits up those fish amongst multiple entities when historically those are supposed to be there for the river. As well as by not doing that, you are also leaving those fish available as a buffer over the 122 because we know that we're not going to be able to catch all of those fish, right? So you're now giving yourself a little bit of a buffer to make sure that we make the 122,000, which we have missed 7 out of 10 years. 7 out of the last 10 years, we've failed to meet the minimum objective, okay? So that's where my board of directors is very concerned. Looking at the history, looking at the data, looking at what we're being presented in front of us, is that it's going to be very difficult to craft seasons based on the Sacramento and the Sacramento harvest model that the NOAA Fisheries runs through the council. So hopefully that gave you some information. If you got any questions on that, you can type them in the comments. I'll answer at the end of this video. Second, Klamath. So Klamath, we were told today that we have 82,000 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, basically. Again, that's not an exact number, but it's very close. So 82,000 fish. But then when they started coming down, Tony from NOAA Fisheries said, we have a total of 20,000 and change. I don't know what the number off the top of my head was. It was 20,600 or 20,800, somewhere right around in there. And then under de minimis fisheries, right, the floor escapement is 40,700. That's how many fish they need to come home to the Klamath and Trinity systems and all tributaries in order to have, and that's natural spawners. Hatcheries don't count. No hatchery fish count on the Klamath and Trinity. It is managed completely different. It's managed on natural spawners only. So you then take the estimate, which, keep in mind, I just told you is 40,700 is what is healthy for a healthy system. And that number is supposed to go up here in the future because of the removal of the dams. Now there's more suitable habitat. So they're saying that that number could go up to 120,000 here in a few years. And that's what the Klamath work group is working on, of raising that floor escapement in the future. So under de minimis fisheries, even though we don't even have that many fish coming home, we only have 20,600 coming home. Under de minimis, under the harvest control rule, it allows you to harvest up to 10% of that stock. And so we saw that today in the chart. If you go back, you could go on the CDFW website and go check this. So what I'm saying, under the harvest control rule, it shows you a number of 20,600 or 20,800, and then 10% of that would roughly be about 2,000 fish. According to the harvest control rule of the graph going up, you would go down to the number, go up, and it says 10%. So you could harvest 2,000 total Klamath fish this year, okay? So I already told you where all the sac fish were. Now here's where we get managed on the Klamath. So you have 2,000 total harvestable fish. So now let's go through our splits, right? Number 1, 50-50 split, ocean to tribal. So out of those 2,000 fish that are total harvestable fish, you would split them, okay? So they would get 1,000 to the tribe, and then their tribes have a split between the Yurok and the Hoopas, the 2 tribes that have commercial fishing rights, and they would get 1,000 total fish to harvest between those 2 tribes, and then there would be 1,000 to harvest between the ocean, okay? So then you would take those 1,000 harvestable fish, okay? And it doesn't matter what that number is, whatever, if there's 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, the splits are all the same. So then you would take the 1,000 fish, according to what I saw, and you would then take that 1,000, and then you would do the historical split with Oregon, okay? And when you get into that conversation, age 4, it's a controversial topic between Oregon and California of where those splits are, but they're somewhere between. Oregon likes to see it at a 60-40. California says it's closer to seeing it at a 70-30 historically on the splits, 70 going to California, 30 going to Oregon on the percentage base. And, you know, a lot of times when I was in the SAS, we would meet in the middle, or we would try to always help out. And you could ask the Oregon representatives. I myself multiple times had tried to find areas to where I could find extra fish for them so that they could access their fisheries and go fishing. I'm not a negative person about it's us versus them. Absolutely not. We always have tried to do that. And Oregonian SAS members can tell you that we've helped them over multiple years be able to access their fishery. Like last year, because there were some people that are high up that didn't want Oregon fishing for Chinook off the coast last year because of our stocks. And now you know why. Because the 213,000 that they said were out there for the sack really weren't out there. It was 99,000. So harvesting any fish was the wrong thing to do last year. But we had fought to make sure that Oregon could go fishing. So if you're from Oregon listening, you'll at least know that it was our groups. It was the SAS from last year, Jimmy, Johnny, myself, and George, that were said, we're going to be closed, but we would like at least a few thousand fish to go to Oregon so that they could open their fishery. Because otherwise it would have shut down the entire Oregon coast. And there were some people that were highly against that, but I'll just tell you that that's the way that it ended up. So we got Oregon open last year because of that, because of being willing to, have some of those Chinook impacts go up into Oregon. This year, now looking at the Klamath, getting back to the Klamath, and you start looking at those numbers, right? You got 2,000, half go to the tribes, half go to the ocean. Now you do your split, okay? So if you want to do the 65-35 split, which is right down the middle of, where both people think, that's 350 fish, Klamath impacts to Oregon, okay? 350 impacts. It's not going to be the Sacramento impacts that, halt or confine Oregon fisheries. It's going to be those Klamath impacts. So wherever those Klamath fish are being caught are going to be the areas of Oregon in the ocean that you're not going to be able to fish this year because you only have 350 impacts, right? If these numbers continue through, that would only be 650 impacts for the California. But now you have to give the California in-river fishery that was set up for 15% in-river quota of the California surplus. So you would get 15% of that 650 number, okay? So to do math roughly, that's about 100 fish you would have for an in-river fishery in the Klamath and Trinity. 100 fish, according to those numbers. You would have roughly 550 about fish impacts in all of California for the Klamath. That's age 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, natural spawners, okay? 550 impacts on the Klamath is the major concern, and that will be the confining factor, which means Klamath KMZ is going to be very much impossible to open because you open it at the wrong time, you're going to have way too many impacts there. There might be some opportunity in May where you're going to have less impacts, but starting to look at that July, August, it's going to be almost impossible to open up fisheries in that KMZ because of the amount of impacts that you have. Furthermore, moving down the coast into the Fort Bragg sector, you're going to have a lot of impacts in that August timeline in Fort Bragg on those stocks. So it's going to be very hard to offer those opportunity in that Fort Bragg sector. You're going to have to stay away from the Klamath fish. You have to stay away from them, which typically means you have to move the fleet south. You have to move the fleet down into San Francisco and even below, down into Monterey. What really curtails fisheries down below San Francisco is the winter run, the ESA listed winter run. And the ESA listed winter run this year is 4,889 fish of abundance is what they're predicting, I think. I think I got that number wrong, but it's 4,800 something. And that set a 20% exploitation rate. So that's really hard to hit when we have such low abundance of sackfish. So the winter run is not going to be the confining factor. It's going to be those Klamath fish and the Sacramento abundance. And so the key for the Salmon Advisory subpanel is going to be, can we find time, area, place on the water within Fort Bragg, San Francisco, Monterey, and KMZ, those 4 sectors, to give people access to the fishery while still not having those impacts on those Klamath fish. And so hopefully that kind of gives you a better understanding of how they are going to try to craft seasons. And you all are going to give your public input of, I want opportunity in the Klamath. I want opportunity off of Bodega Bay. I want opportunity off of Fort Bragg. I want opportunity in Eureka. I want opportunity in Monterey. I want opportunity in Ventura. I want opportunity off San Mateo and Half Moon Bay. I want opportunity in San Francisco. But what you need to understand is that the Salmon Advisory Subpanel members can only put you in certain areas. So that's why it's good to make comments and public comment about where you all want access, because they will try to give you the access where they can. And then if they can't, they can at least tell you. And hopefully this explanation will help you understand why they can't give you access in certain sectors. There's 4 sectors: KMZ, California, Fort Bragg, San Francisco, and Monterey. Now, San Francisco has the largest effort, right? There's more geographic population and anglers on the water in San Francisco than anywhere else. So opening up one day in San Francisco could be the same as opening up 3 or 4 days in Fort Bragg or in Monterey, because there's less effort. So you got to also understand that too, from the effort side, from, how many people will go if we open up one day. And so hopefully that will kind of give you a little bit better understanding. I know a lot of you, it's probably right over your head and you're like, holy moly, I can't believe it. I got a lot of text messages yesterday and today, like, how are they even going to ask for 122,000 fishery when the last 2 years of closure, we've been demanding, the feds have been saying 180,000, right? They've been saying 180,000 minimum floor for the past 2 years, and they've missed it both years, right? They missed it last year. 180 was estimated, 213 was the actual number, but they said 180 to get their minimum, and we got 99 in a full closed fishery. Then in 23, we had 165,000 fish, right? And we closed down California, and Oregon got shut down for Chinook. And we really only got 133 is what they said, okay? So the model was off 21% in 2023 with full closed fisheries in 2 states in the ocean for Chinook. The model was off 55% last year with all of California fisheries closed down and Oregon not. So it kind of gives you more of a background of how to understand this. It's very complex. I encourage more people to get involved. I mean, whatever sector you're in, whatever state you're in, get involved and learn all this information, because it's so interesting. I mean, a guy like me that spends every single day working on salmon management, I've sat in tens of thousands of hours of meetings, and on all of these committees, I've sat on every committee for salmon and steelhead and trout in the state of California over the past 10 years. And so I've learned how all of these things interact and work. It's very difficult if you're just showing up for the first time and you're like, are we going to get to go fishing or are we not? Well, according to the meeting today, they said there's a harvestable surplus. The state said that they are going to manage down to 122,000, which is the minimum, right? This is the minimum that they can harvest, or that they have to have come home. If you believe that, you need to keep that river, the historical river of the 14% on top of that 122 to protection as acting as a buffer, you can make those comments. If you think that they need to leave that allocation alone, you can make those comments. If you believe that they need to move that river allocation or that historical average of harvest out into the ocean, you can say that. If you feel they should open up all the fisheries wide open, you can say that. If you feel that there shouldn't be fishing for this or for that, you can say that. I think that one thing that you will see is the camaraderie of the disappointment and the despair of everybody that is involved in a business, from your tackle stores to your bait suppliers, to your charter boats, to your inland guides, to your commercial fleet. I would say anyone that's in business in the salmon community has been destroyed. There still is no money for anyone that has been shut down for the past 2.5 years. There's still no money. The applications for 2023 are supposed to open next week, and there could be money paid out as soon as July. That's the newest information on the 2023 disaster. We're told that the 2024 disaster money will not even be looked at for another couple years. That's how far out it is. So just for all of you that know that for the people that are engaged in business and or have a business in the salmon industry, I just wanted you all to know that they're not getting any money for any of this. And the money that they are going to get is a fraction of a percentage of what they would have made or what they would have lost or what they actually did lose. They're still paying all of their bills. But I wanted you to at least understand that so that you know that there's going to be a lot of people that say close it down again. And I'm already hearing that. And they're going to make those recommendations because this will be the third year. This will be the third year that they actually have, a 3-year cycle. So 23, 24, 25. So if it did stay closed this year, you would have a full 3-year cycle to rebuild, and you have the best chances of long-term sustainability of the Sacramento stocks. Our organization has not made any recommendations. Our board will be meeting next week, and we will be writing a letter. We'll post it on this page, and we'll post it to our website, and we'll be sending it to the Pacific Fisheries Management Council after we've absorbed all of this information, digest it, and then we will make our recommendation of where we feel that is most important. We possibly could remain neutral and not make a letter or make a comment. That is a possibility as well. But for at least all of you understanding that that's how the model works, that's how the process works, and then those 3 alternatives that are leaving from the council in March, you'll have alternative A, B, and C, 1, 2, and 3. Alternative 1, 2, and 3. Number 1 is normally the most liberal seasons possible. Alt 2 is normally the most middle of the road, and then Alt 3 is normally the most conservative. I'll guarantee you Alt 3 is going to say close this year. I mean, you can see it. The state couldn't open a fishery last year based on 213,000, and they took that historical river harvest of 14%, put it into the model, and they came out and they said there's 33,000 fish and total to harvest. So 6,600 of those went to Oregon. Okay, so they really only had 27,000 fish. They said, we can't open a fishery. We can't manage it. They said law enforcement can't manage it. The wardens can't check boats. It's too hard for them to hire all the seasonal staffers to count all the commercial boat fleet and everything that they were able to do. And so the state said last year, we can't manage you to that low of a fishery. If we open it up statewide, we're too worried that you guys will catch way too many fish in like a 2 or 3 day season. And so that's what happened last year. So I anticipate hearing more of that because we have a lower abundance than we had last year. So I think that, we will have to, see how this process moves forward. And I've tried to, dumb it down as much as I can into layman's terms so that I hate using the word layman's terms. I'll say fisherman's terms, fishermen or fisherwoman's terms, so that people that are anglers can just kind of understand a basis of how this works. You have that minimum number of the 122,000, which that 122,000, if we don't get back 75% of that, which is 91,500 fish, which is the MSST, that's the minimum sustainable threshold in order to not be fully collapsed. They call it overfished. And the anglers hate that word overfished because it's like, we didn't go fishing. But how did we miss, that escapement? But if that 3-year geometric mean is below the 75% MSST, of that 122,000, then you're considered overfished, and then the council has to do rebuilding plans. The last time we were overfished was 2015, 16, and 17. So the council rebuilt building plans in 2018 to rebuild the stock, okay? And all they have to do to rebuild the stock is get over a 3-year geometric mean of 91,500 fish. that doesn't mean fishing's good, because fishing inland is not good when there's 122,000 fish. When there's 99,000, 122,000, 150,000 fish in the three rivers of the Sacramento, Feather, and American rivers, there's not good fishing. Not for the general public, for recreational anglers. There's just not. And the reason that there are, that there aren't that availability is because the Nimbus Basin above has been closed. The low flow in the Feather River has been closed for decades. The upper Sacramento 5.5 miles has been closed. So where all these fish go, because of all the hot water that's coming down all these rivers, the fish have to shoot through it as fast as they can and get all the way to the top. Well, where do all these fish go? They go where we can't even go get them. We can't even target them because they shoot up as fast as they can. In 1 to 2 days, they'll get all the way from Rio Vista all the way to the top. And we can't access them. We can't even go after them. So that's why you see a lot of the times that you have to have more fish back home, and why you see huge avocation of a higher floor escapement for not only the species for spawning, but for also recreational angling. So hopefully that helped. I'll go through the questions real quick, and then I'll get out of here. And sorry I took so long, everyone. About 52 minutes so far here. It looks like 51 minutes. So if you're over 65, Matt Thomas, and you said, let's try and get a fish a year. Yeah, good comment. Isaiah West. Yeah, they opened the Smith River last year. That will still stay open. I think that's not managed by the council. So it's a great question, Isaiah. There's a lot of fisheries that are not managed by the council. The McCollum fishery, the San Joaquin fishery for the Tuolumne, the Stanislaus, and San Joaquin. Those are not managed by the council. The Smith River, okay, the coastal Chinook and the eel, and the Russian and all of those coastal mad, all those coastal streams, those aren't managed by the council. The only part that they manage is the age 4 coastal Chinooks are managed by them. That could be another factor, and I don't want to confuse everyone, but that is an ESA listed stock that today we heard that exploitation rate cannot go over 16% postseason. You used to be able to manage it to 16% preseason, but many years in the ocean fishery went over that 2, 3, 4 times. And so the federal government has now said, I think today they said 7.7% preseason. So that could be another factor that is a limiting factor of how do you adjust the fleet up and down the state. So good question, Isaiah. Robert, do you think we'll propose a river season? I think that if the ocean opens, that you'll see an inland opening. That's where I think. I think you'll see parity in that. So if there's a recreational fishery in the ocean that opens up for any reason, then you'll see a fishery open up in the McCollum, American, and Feather Rivers inland. I think that's what you'll see the state do. Rick Riso, yeah, there's, your comments, valid, and you can, that's a different topic for a different day about tribal fisheries versus non-tribal fisheries. I don't engage in tribal fisheries. I only engage in non-tribal. Dion, hey Dion, hope you're doing well. Commercial fisherman. Yeah, 165 in the Sacramento abundance is not even a 180 floor. So what's going on? That's a great question. I don't know how you go from 180, you miss 180, you miss 180, you miss 180 3 years in a row, and then you go, oh, okay, well, let's shoot for 122. Because if they said we're shooting for 180, obviously you would already know that there would be no salmon season this year because they're at 165. And you all remember 3 weeks ago, my forecast was higher than that, and my scientist forecast is higher than the 165 in my mind because we were looking at the releases of the hatchery fish and looking at averages of survival rates in the same typical outflow to the ocean. And so you can compare those historical, numbers and start looking at what do you believe the abundance to be. And as I told all of you back 3 weeks ago, my estimate was in the SAC that there's somewhere between 180 and 240, but not all those fish come home. Right? Because of all the trucking, you're seeing that 30, 40, 50% stray rates on some of those releases. And so therefore, even though there might be 250,000 Sacramento fish out there, that stray rate of, let's just say that 40% stray rate, okay, on average right there between those releases, you take that 40% off of that 250, that's 100,000 fish. Now you're down to 150. So now you see where they're getting that number of 165. I think they were ultra aggressive on their autocorrelation this year. They want to get it right. And I think that's why you're seeing the number not be there. So there possibly could be more fish out in the ocean this year to harvest. However, accessing them might be difficult because of the autocorrelation in the model really just brought us all the way down to the bottom. And you all know that those 40% of fish that are sac fish, they stray into Napa River, Coyote Creek, Alameda Creek. They stray into Walnut Creek. They stray, in all the tributaries in the bottom of the bay. They stray into all the tributaries throughout Stockton, throughout the Delta, throughout all the little river sheds, Deepwater Channel, up into Yolo Bypass, up into Stockton. We saw pictures last year of, 30, 40, 50 dead salmon at the end of a canal that took a wrong turn. So a lot of these fish are taking wrong turns. And that's why it's so important, and you've heard me advocate for years, that we have to have fish imprint correctly. If they don't imprint them and you truck them, this is the consequence of it. You might have a better ocean abundance out there, but if they're not coming home, it doesn't give us that access the next year. So, last couple questions. Nimbus had a great return and shipped eggs to other hatcheries. Yeah, they did, Robert. That's great. Comment, they did. Our group, the commercial fleet and the charter fleet all recommended that the state send eggs, and we're grateful to CDFW for sending eggs from the American hatchery and the Feather hatchery up to Coleman to get them to their egg quota. So that was great. But keep in mind why the American River and the McCallamy River have such better returns. It's because they're lower in the system, right? They're, almost 200 miles lower in the system than Coleman is. So those hatcheries do get more fish back, but they have those higher stray rates of that 30, 40, 50%. It was told to me, and I don't know how accurate the number is, but it was told to me this year that all those fish back in the American River, which was like 40,000 fish, right, in the natural spawning area, plus the hatchery fish, it was 50,000 fish came back to the American River last year. It was told to me that 30+%, and they don't know the exact number because they weren't able to test all the fish in the river and the carcasses, but 30 to 40% of those fish were McCallamy fish. Okay. So you start thinking about that and you say, okay, well, you look at 50,000 fish. Well, 30, 40% is 15 to 20,000 fish came from the McCallamy, right? Which makes sense because the McCallamy survival rate was higher from all those trucked fish, but those fish stray like crazy. So is it good that fish stray into the Sacramento systems? Yes, you want as many fish straying into our rivers as you can right now. The problem is that we are seeing a high stray rate from the Feather and American fish straying into other systems. And that's where it doesn't benefit us, right? It puts the fish in the ocean, but if they don't come home, it's hard to get the next year open in the ocean. So anyhow, Vance Staplin, hey bud. Yeah, the term overfish needs to be changed. Over pumped. I love it. I agree with you 100% what you're saying. Sal, thank you. I appreciate the comment. I work very hard to try to give you the most up-to-date information as I can. Steve, I see your comment. 240 to 360. And that was based on 12 million fish trucked from the Feather and the American River, 12 million fish, 2% survival would give you 240,000. 3% survival gives you 360,000 out of just those two hatcheries, right? But again, how many of those are actually going to come home? And that's why I think that autocorrelation dropped. I'll have more conversations about this, and then I will come live to you all from after the council gets going and we get more information, and I'll bring you all up to speed on kind of more of this. So I hope it all, helps you all out. If the season does close, the benefit of that is that you will have a full 3-year cycle closed. And so that could rebuild and help us long term. I understand everyone wants to go fishing. Everyone wants to catch Chinook salmon. And everyone needs to those omegas, and everybody needs to go take their kids fishing. Our kids are not fishing. And the commercial fleet needs to get out there. They need to catch fish so that they can provide Safeway, Whole Foods, restaurants with fish. The charter boats need to get out there so that they can support their businesses. They're all small businesses. And the recreational fishermen just need to be able to go out there and go catch a fish. And in Oregon and in California on our stocks, the Klamath and the Sacramento. Anyhow, an hour is good enough, everybody. Thank you very much for all of your support. We do need your support more. If you like this content, you want to see more, go to our YouTube channel and smash the subscribe button. There's lots of videos up there that you can watch at any time at your own pace. And it also helps us building up that for the YouTube channel. So go to NorCal Guides on the YouTube channel, find us, and go hit the subscribe button there. Go to ncgasa.org. You can sign up to support us, $30 membership, all the way up as high as that you can to support us so that we can keep going out there and advocating and fighting for all of you and bringing you the most up-to-date information as best as we can and trying to give you a clear vision of everything that's going on and not just trying to, have tunnel vision on one sector or one industry or one group of people. We're trying to give it to you on a broad basis so that you can all make your informations, your decisions, and make your public comments correct. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Go to ncgasa.org. Sign up today to support us. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you here in about 10 days. See y'all.